Welcome to another MarketMuse content strategy webinar in our MarketMuse content strategy webinar series. I'm Jeff Coyle. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer of MarketMuse. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is, they say blue ocean content, but it's really using data to make your content stand out. So how can we integrate our own data that we create, data from our products, data from our services offerings, or data that we research into our calendars? And my guest here is infinitely qualified to have this discussion. I look forward to introducing her. Before that, though, I'm going to do some housekeeping. Ask us anything here. It can be about, try to keep it about content or search engine optimization or content operations or things related, but feel free. Give it a shot. If you got something else, pop it in the chat. We'll get to it in line if it's directly relevant to what we're discussing, or at the end in our Q&A section. We're also going to be doing a Ask Me Anything with our guest in the Content Strategy Collective Slack community. So while you're listening to this, tap into your Slack. If you don't already have an invite, you're going to see the link for that special invite in the background in a few minutes if you don't already have that bit.ly link. Additionally, this will be available in the next few days via our archive emailing. You'll get a note with a link to the recording. While you're there, though, go check out content strategy webinars on MarketMuse. There's now, I believe, something like 75 to 100 a recording from such amazing people as Pam Didner on sales enablement, Kevin Indig on user intent, Andy Crestadina on how to set up analytics and write great content briefs. So go check that out. There's just a treasure trove of free information, really a course on how to do content strategy. Okay, now those are the housekeepings for the day. I want to introduce the head of content from 2 Octobers. I'm so excited to have her. She has 15 or more years experience, both as an in-house and as an agency leader. Today really focuses on content for 2 Octobers for their clients. Yasmin Davila, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Jeff. How are you doing? Glad to be here.
Fine. All right, cool. Before we get into it, what did I not include in that intro that everybody should know about you? What are you working on right now? And how should people be framing today's discussion? What should they be thinking? Everybody's so bogged down. There was a Google core update announcement this morning. Everybody's getting ready for the holidays, and they're worried about the fact that people stop working on the 15th of December. What's going on with you, and how are you thinking about content strategy right now?
Yeah, so I was just talking to some of my coworkers about this, and it's funny. I always get the clients that come to me at the final hour saying, okay, I'm ready to do some content for Black Friday, and we're a week out. And so like, well, we're a little late to the boat on that. And so in those situations, it's really talking to them about, starting to plan ahead for next year or for what's coming next, whether that's the next holiday, the next big thing in their marketing planner, or their product release calendar. And then what are there things that we can do now sort of in the interim, obviously creating new content. A little late to gain traction on that, but there are some things that we can do, from an SEO perspective that could help. So things like maybe adjusting some of their titles and metas. Maybe they want to call out free shipping offers or other promotions that they're running around the holiday that can have more of an immediate impact, versus trying to create an entirely new landing page. But starting to educate them on, why we do start planning these things quite well in advance, and typically why I like to plan a couple of months at least in advance when it comes to content calendars and content creation.
What an awesome way to get started with this discussion. But yeah, I mean, yeah. I would take that opportunity, right? It's we've got a week. What are the things that actually can happen in a week? And that's when you're talking about, conversion rate optimization, like you mentioned, like free shipping and calls to action. And integrations. I mean, if you've got a page that gets 1 million visits a month on your site, well, a link on that page could generate 10,000 views. So those are your levers when you've got a week left. You're not going to put out an entire cluster of content, start to finish on the best Nike shoes for marathon running this you're not going to get that done starting today and making money for your promo code on shoes next week. It's just
Exactly.
not going to happen. So just
Exactly.
leaping into today's conversation, and excuse my cough, I'm getting over a slight cold. Um, we're talking about using data to make our content stand out. And one of the most common ways that people think about using data is the analogy of red ocean and blue ocean. Just in case anybody's not familiar with that, who's on the discussion, how do you describe what a red ocean is, what a blue ocean is, and why that content resonates when you're trying to make a client differentiated? So.
Yeah, so I think with Red Ocean, this is really focusing more on the competition and trying to compete within the existing market and what's already there versus a blue ocean strategy. You're really trying to create a new market, create new demand, be unique within the space. And I think it's an important concept, and I like to steer clients more towards the blue ocean strategy, because I think what happens is a lot of clients will tend to fixate on how do I beat this competitor, or I want to rank number one, and they sort of take a competitor centric view versus looking at a customer centric or brand centric view, which I think is really how to be successful in content. Of course, there's a lot of insights and things we can garner from competitors that are ranked well or that are performing well. But in order to create successful content, you really need to start with who is your target audience and what are your goals as a business, and then sort of using those as your foundation. And then naturally, you'll just build successful content because you are really starting with that premise of, okay, let me put myself in my shoes of my customers, and what do they want? What are they looking for out of this content? What are their pain points and questions? And then go from there.
And so if I'm going to be in a scenario where I've already assessed there is a lot of coverage of this, and what's the difference between being in that particular space and writing content that is, going to, fit the current needs versus layering on an additional component that would differentiate? What do you say to somebody who can't figure it out how to differentiate? Maybe their historical content has been very derivative. How do you go from, I looked at what other people were doing and I kind of did a reasonable job at that, which this happens a lot, I'm sure, with you. And
Yes,
how do
yes.
you go from there to kind of thinking critically or kind of changing the focus on the camera? Because I find that transition is very hard to get someone out of,
Yes.
looking at a search result. There's a bunch of definitions there. So they're like, I need to go
Yeah,
write a definition clearly. And they think that's the end of the day. Oh, and you're like, no, no, no.
exactly.
There's a whole lot more to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that people really get fixated on just, well, I typed in the keyword and this is what showed up, and their fixation is on, okay, well, this piece is number one and this is what they did, so I'll just write that. And it's just basically everyone producing the exact same content. And so I really encourage clients to, if you're just position yourself again as your target audience. And if you're doing a search, are you looking for more of the same? If you're looking at this piece of content, is that really addressing everything that you want? And so it's really, requires that extra effort and the extra mile of going and doing some research as to what are those FAQs. And a lot of clients will say, what, I don't really know where to start. I'm not sure, how do I know what my customers are looking for? I don't know anything about SEO, for example, or where to start looking. A lot of times internally, you have those tools readily accessible. So for example, with retailers, go to your customer service or call center agents. What kinds of questions are they getting on a regular basis that, maybe your product page isn't converting the way you want because you're not addressing some of the things that customers are looking to know. And so they're having to go to all these different places to find that information versus finding it on your site. So that's one example, but also looking at, again, really digging into who your target audience is, what those personas look like. Your marketing teams will have a lot of that information available. Like, go take a look at that and see, what types of things are those people looking for, depending on what life stage they're at, where they may be physically or otherwise, and like what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think it's just layering in that additional piece of the customer data versus just focusing on the keyword and the search volume and just replicating what the competition is doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, and I love that you walked through different organizations or different groups inside your organization. The other side effect of doing this is that it can bring teams together. If you're at a
Yeah.
mid-market to small enterprise, the fact that you actually care about what's happening in support,
Hmm.
the fact that you care about what's happening in customer success,
Hmm.
in account management, or in your data science or business intelligence wing or finance wing,
Hmm.
you started to talk about a couple of those concepts. Using scripts, using data from the support team. Um,
Hmm.
uh, you know, Other things to be thinking about is, information about your industry or things that you might track for business intelligence. So
Hmm.
what types of things are you typically looking for? The adage I always use is what makes you special, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people will say, nothing, I'm just like everyone else. But
Yeah.
who at your company is special? Who has special knowledge? And what of that knowledge hasn't made it to your site? That's the pony in most of these scenarios.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, well, yeah, I have a BI team. We use analytics canvas, and we have a BI team that tracks all this industry and competitive analysis. And I'm like, how much of
Hmm.
that's on your website? None.
Hmm.
Okay, well, let's start there. But what are other ways that you kind of build that arsenal of data to then be able to weave into a solid narrative? And then, with the blue ocean strategies, I know that in our earlier discussion, you were talking about storytelling and those types of skills that
Hmm.
need to be employed once you do know what all your data is. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of the data, I mean, from an SEO perspective, one thing I always encourage is that cross channel collaboration. So, go to your paid team. What ads are performing well? What are they doing that's resonating and working? Because a lot of times there's great insights that you can garner from that. And then it also helps both channels perform better. You were talking about teams coming together, but it also, when you're not working in silos as much as what happens at a lot of organizations, you're doing more of that cross-channel collaboration. You're really supporting each other, and there's some synergies there in terms of the approach that you're taking. So, looking in there, also with social media, there's certainly a lot of overlap with content and SEO there as well. So just communicating with those teams to see what's performing and what's working well there. And I think even at a higher level, I always encourage clients too to take a step back. I mean, it seems like a very silly basic thing, but really thinking about, okay, what's my unique value proposition? What are my unique selling points? For example, if you're a women's clothing retailer, well, there's a lot of people that sell women's clothing. What makes you special? What makes you unique? And really tapping into those specific things and building off that for content, as opposed to just, again, sort of trying to boil the ocean and just write generic copy about everything, just focusing more on what do you have to bring to the table. And if you're trying to describe your brand and what makes you stand out, making sure that that is incorporated within your content strategy.
I love that. I forget that those
Yeah.
are other channels. Honestly, it's like I always just think the paid team and the paid social team are just best buddies with the search team and the content team, but it's not always the case. I'm always thinking about
Yeah.
the sphere around them. Um, the question I like to ask folks is, how would you prioritize what we write?
Hmm.
So it's not, it's like, what kind of expertise do they have? Do you do a lot of interviewing in your process, or a conversational recording, that type of thing, when you're trying to in that ideation phase? Or how do you
Yeah.
coach teams on that part, and how do you coach teams on being better storytellers? That's my other part of that.
Yeah, so I personally I like to do a lot of, again, more sort of general brand research. So taking a step back, what I'll often do is look at how are people talking about a brand online. So I'll go look at reviews, blog posts, different forums, see how they're talking about competitors. If they're comparing a certain brand versus a competitor, what are the things that they're calling out? I try to identify patterns within that, and see if there's anything that can be incorporated within my content strategy from the information that I'm seeing. For example, if people are repeatedly talking about, well, I don't really see that there's product quality. For example, I have a furniture retailer right now, and looking at their brand, they're compared to another brand quite a lot, and people are saying, oh well, their products come from China and they're not quality, and I don't know how well they hold up, and all these things. And because they've got this really small blip of copy on their site sort of buried in the FAQ that talks about the product quality. And, they have all this amazing artisanship and great things about their furniture, and it actually is very high quality. But I've encouraged them, why don't we call that out to the forefront? I mean, this is an investment piece. People are investing quite a bit of money in these pieces, and this is a hurdle for them. So just being able to do some of that sort of social listening, and I kind of honestly do a lot of it manually, because I just find that it's, pretty effective to do that. So even if you don't have those tools, just doing a simple search online, or obviously there's a lot of tools available to help automate that process a bit, but just seeing what types of things are people saying about you, and trying to address that.
I literally had that question. I had that conversation yesterday with a, what I can say without giving it away, with a particular clothing item one might put on a body part. I'll just leave it there. So it basically said, how are people, not you, talking about you? How are people? But okay, so then there's people that are just talking, but how are people, not you, talking about you in order to generate traffic for their websites and potentially generate affiliate dollars? You need to control as much of the narrative as you can in that buyer journey. When you enable somebody who compares coffee cups, this wasn't coffee cups, but I'm looking at my coffee cup, compares coffee cups, well, they're comparing you to somebody else. They're making money when people buy those coffee cups on it. So why do you not want to be there at that stage of the buy cycle? It's like with these B2B teams, who the demand gen team, the lead gen team, and the content team, and the search team aren't getting along. You got to be there for the entire journey if you want to be there at the bottom of the funnel. You don't, I like to say, you don't deserve to be there at the bottom of the funnel unless you were there at the top.
Right.
And that's what you're describing. It's to say, let's learn about how people are talking about us what you're talking about is post-purchase, which is another type of content people miss. It's, they bought your coffee cup and they were telling you stories about why, it leaks a whole bunch. Or it's the most amazing high quality one you've ever made. And so why aren't you talking about that during the sales process? So I love that. And you were talking about quality, and how do you appeal to kind of emotions and customer research while building out different types of content that will, be very unique, where no one else can replicate this if we do it this way. Like, they're not going to be just, kicked with this. Somebody can't just put out an identical version of this, which is my definition of blue ocean.
Right. So again, I really try to focus and hone in on what those customer pain points, or not always necessarily pain points, but what is important to them when they are, what are they trying to get out of this content? But, if it's a purchase, what are they looking for to help them to reach that level of conversion, and making sure that we're calling that out. So for example, with this furniture client, rather than just saying, on the product page, white sectional sofa, $1,000 or whatever. Okay, great. But as a customer, I want to visualize what that looks like in my home. Okay, you're telling me the length. I don't know what that means in relation to what. Maybe putting, for example, a blog post that showcases the furniture in someone's home so I can see what it looks like. What type of style is this? Describe it to me. Is it mid-century, modern? Like, start painting that picture for the customer of things that are important. So they want to know what type of style it is. Is it going to go with their decor? Describe to me the furniture, make me feel like I can visualize myself sitting on it. It's a plush, deep seat couch, perfect for, movie watching or whatever the case is, just sort of a little bit more, like you said, painting that narrative, because by the time someone gets done reading that and looking at all of the associated content, you want them to be like, yes, I need this sofa, or whatever it is that you're selling or trying to convey.
I mean, that's such a great example. You're showcasing that you're the expert in that buying journey. You're showcasing that you actually care. So it's not, the name of your website isn't 6475129.co, and you go there and there just happens to be a couch on there and you buy it. There's a reason why you have a brand. There's a reason why you have a website. There's a reason why you have content. It's to illustrate that, to show them them. And I think the way you described it was really like, visualize it in my room. Because if you don't, someone else will. I mean, someone else
Yeah,
is going to write. It might be an app that lets you put the chair in the room and build the room, which
exactly.
I know that those exist. And then why do people do
Yeah.
that? So when you click on them, they get paid a fee to then go to your shopping cart.
Hmm.
But if you're the brand in control, I just love that example. So let's change the gears a little bit to, you talked about data, you talked about some data sources, manual research, some third
Hmm.
party side. How do you make decisions or kind of interview a team about what data to use, what types of data will be easy to get at, what types of
Hmm.
processes would you employ to, um, for someone who says, like, I just use, my brain and maybe,
Yeah.
this SEO tool that everyone else uses that provides, sort descend by search volume. I don't
Yeah.
really know what else to do. How do I get started with this? And what are the, what would be like
Yeah.
the killer's dozen here for data sets to see if somebody has access to?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I definitely get a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
content production and content strategy can be very overwhelming, in terms of where to start. And so I like to break it down into sort of two buckets for folks, which is let's look at sort of the short term, more quote unquote quick wins, and then sort of the longer term strategy. And so I think, people think they need, they're not sure what tools they need, or they need a lot of fancy tools. And a lot of these tools are helpful, but there's some things that you already have readily available that can help. So for example, for the quick wins or short-term strategy, I love Search Console data. That's a place where you can go and take a look at ways that you can do some easy optimization implementations. You can see, how your pages are showing up. So look at which pages are getting a lot of impressions. Maybe they're ranking well, but maybe the click-through rate just isn't there. Why is that? Well, maybe you just need to tweak your title and meta description because people don't find it compelling and they just don't feel the need to click through. Kind of, reassess that. Maybe you haven't refreshed it in a couple of years because it's a product that's been live for a long time and you forgot about it. So I think that's a really important one to call out, is that a lot of people will think, oh, I'm just going to throw new content at the problem, so to speak, if they feel like maybe their rankings are down, or they're trying to improve SEO traffic, or anything like that. But a lot of times it is just conducting a content audit and seeing what sorts of assets that you already have. So looking at, that Search Console data, your Google Analytics data, what's performing, what's not performing. If you have content that's maybe showing up sort of on the cusp of ranking well, maybe it's like on page 2, but it just needs a little love. Maybe it just needs some extra content on there. Maybe you need to go look at what your consumers care about and add a section of content for that, or just refresh it if you've got some outdated statistics or anything like that. So I love looking at that sort of under the hood to see where to start. And then for longer term strategy, it's kind of going back to the things that we talked about, and reaching out to internal teams, again, to see what sorts of questions are out there, using some tools. There's a lot of SEO tools available that give you a sense of what are those people also ask questions, or FAQs that are really common. Things like Google Trends, which is a free tool that you can see what types of topics are trending related to a particular subject. So that can give you some direction. Again, aligning it with whatever your business goals are. And your overall marketing calendar, but it can give you some more direction in terms of what you should be focusing on in the long run.
No, that's great. And not only for the obvious reasons that you just basically described the value proposition of MarketMuse, but other than that, I always love when the answer to that question is that.
Yeah,
But
you're
no,
welcome. You're welcome.
yeah, thank you. So really identifying what to create, what to update, using more data than just maybe, you know, third party or search volume, but also then trying to figure out internally what other things could really make us stand out. So it's like pairing the best and the best is kind of the way
Hmm.
that I interpret what you said. Another
Hmm.
thing that I really got from your communicate, what you just said there was, um, I like to joke around it. It's SERP awareness, or
Yes.
SERPual awareness, right? It's old pages, right? We call them
Hmm.
cringers sometimes when it, your team would
Sometimes.
cringe if they knew that many people went to that page and that was their first experience with your brand. It's something that
Exactly.
hasn't been updated. It's ugly. It's got the wrong formatting. That. So that's one where if you're talking about quick wins, updating a page that deserves an update for any one of many reasons. I love that idea. There's a great question from Jeff with the correct spelling of Jeff, by the way, Jeff. If I have a
Okay.
limited time budget, which will provide more traffic? Additional web content or improving a website's SEO? I'm going to restate Jeff's question as being rule-based or technical SEO is probably what he means versus adding additional website content. And so let's do it. Let's say additional content or more
Mhm.
technical or rule-based stuff, fixing a few titles and metas like you mentioned, and then I'll add a third
Yeah.
one, updating existing content. Let's say if we've got to make a change by if something's got to put points on the board by the end of November, which of those
Mhm.
three things, if we can only pick one of those three things,
Mhm.
would you revise? And if you need to put depends in there, make sure you say depends on what. That's my
So I
that's
would say if we have limited budget and time, I would say the combination of titles and metas and updating content. I say combination because I think you can do those in conjunction with each other.
yeah.
Just because creating that new content is going to take time to build traction, a minimum of a couple of months, and just with the way things are going and how competitive things are, probably longer, being realistic, especially if you don't have a lot of visibility to start with. So I always encourage folks to start with the assets that they already have and work with what they already have, really work on enhancing that, looking at, again, sort of that on the cusp content. How can you sort of nudge it along and help build off that? Can you add some internal links to it? Can you add some additional content there, refresh things? And then from there, I would, expand on the content as a more long-term strategy.
Yeah, I mean, right on. It's going to be fast. Just stuff that you're
Mm-hmm.
very strong on already.
Mm-hmm.
What's it missing? Do a little bit of, like you mentioned before, search engine result page analysis. Where are you not standing out? Where do you
Yep.
have below? Where you have pages that are below your expectations for click-through rate and why?
Mm-hmm.
Updating those items. If you do find a quick win for creation, make sure you can knock it out real quick. So that could be what I reference as an intent mismatch. One example would be you have a page ranking reasonably well for a term, but the page doesn't satisfy that intent.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a big one. So if you're trying to put points on the board quickly, finding a situation where someone's searching for, designer, gold lame jacket, and they land on your page, and it's about which jackets you should wear when you're running. Had nothing to do with that, but for some reason you had that authority and you could perform well for it. You need a page about the designer gold lame jacket,
Yep.
and so those are the types of wins that you can put on the board quickly. But
Mm-hmm.
strategically updating, expanding, and integrating is always going to put points on the board quicker. So thank you, Jeff. Great question. Very close and
Yeah.
connected to what we were talking about.
Yeah. Great.
So we've talked about an e-commerce example of building content around a buyer journey to make it unique. But I'd say in that scenario, that was more aligned to our journey, our customer research. In a furniture example or in a similar one, how do you make that furniture content more data driven or make it stand out and like so nobody else could produce it? So if I'm XYZ furniture, I've got the sofa, it's $1,000. I can speak best about my furniture quality. So what
Mm-hmm.
aspects of that it truly then become non-replicable? That's a little bit tougher in e-commerce.
It is. It is. And I think again, it goes back to looking at a lot of the tools and the strategies that we've talked about, because what I've found a lot of times with e-commerce or retailers is that the copy or the content tends to be it can be pretty generic. And so you want to avoid doing that because again, it's just creating more of the same. Like there's so many, and the furniture examples, there's a lot of furniture and there's a lot of people that sell sofas, but again, it's painting that picture for the customer. It is calling out, for example, doing that research on how people are talking about your brand. If they're saying, "Oh, I love this couch because of the cushions are really comfortable," call that out on your product page, like pick a couple of call out points that you know resonate with people or that you think might resonate, and then highlight those because you want to avoid having that copy be really generic where you're just, you know, another furniture company in the sea of furniture stores out there. So just trying to be really specific to your brand. And again, you can go back to, you know, who you are as a brand, what's your overall unique value proposition, and trying to tie that into your copy and the message that you're portraying across all of your content as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's like getting into the, again, why you know you best, and
Mm-hmm.
you know what are the special things that, you know, whether it's talking about how you source your materials, whether it's talking about
Mm-hmm.
why you're the expert in this, or that you have experts that can speak to the fact that it looks best in these types of living rooms, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, testimonials, or the stuff that you see that people are constantly saying you're the best at. You lean
Absolutely.
into that for once. And another one that it actually dovetails with another question from George that just came in, and I love your perspective on his question. But before I say is it's about what won't people who are writing derivative content do too, because like if you can predict that, you know, the site that you're competing with, when they're writing about your furniture or similar furniture, they're just writing, you know, really generic stuff, right? You might want to
Mm-hmm.
figure out that from a competitive analysis perspective. Dovetailing with George's question, he said, hey, in the same vein, what might good quick win strategies be for properties that are very recently established and have little to no content to improve? And he says yet, which leads me to believe that he intends to write content. So at least he's
Right.
off. He's not. He's on that bus. He knows he needs to write some content. Thanks, George, for the question. So if I'm in a
Yeah.
situation where, let's say, I've got a, I'm going to use two scenarios for you because I know you'll
Okay.
be able to answer them separately, and they have two different ones. One of them is an e-commerce shop that has 500 products, and they've never invested into any content. So all they have is category pages and product pages. That's scenario one.
Mm-hmm.
Scenario two is um, they have a 50-page blog, not an e-commerce site. They just started to get traction. So what do you do in the e-commerce scenario? What do you do in the 50-page blog scenario?
Yeah,
So,
so if you've got the e-commerce scenario and you're trying to come up with quick wins, I think the same principles would apply from the quick wins that we were talking about earlier, because really if you're starting from scratch, you kind of have to start somewhere, right? So I think it's, but you don't have a lot of that data to go off of that we were talking about. So it is going to be more research based. So if you really haven't invested into the product pages or any of the pages on your site at this point, take a look at, you know, come up with a couple of target keywords. I always call these like the mission critical keywords. You know, what keywords do you really want to focus on as a theme for your website, and start looking up those, just doing quick searches on Google and see who shows up. How are they, you know, talking about their products, or how are they showing up in the SERP? What are they calling out in titles and meta descriptions? And then you can try testing, you know, similar structure strategy within yours, depending on, you know, who's ranked well and clearly what's resonating with Google. So again, you know, just kind of testing out different structures to see what works and what doesn't. And then over time, you'll develop data to see, okay, well, that worked and that didn't. And then you can start fine tuning from there. But when you're really starting with no data, it is a lot of looking at what the competitors are doing, looking at, you know, how customers are potentially talking about your product, or if it's a new product, how are they talking about similar products? So trying to research into more of that FAQ content. What are the questions that they may have about, you know, comparable products to yours, and then making sure that you're trying to call those out. And then your second one was the blog
yeah,
content.
50-page blog, just gathering steam. What do I do in that for that person?
Yeah, so I would say the blog is probably pretty similar. I think with the blog, you're probably more focused on categorization and, you know, what different sort of topic hubs do I really want to focus on? And so I think it's really focusing in on developing that strategy, because if you just start sort of aimlessly producing blog content without a long-term strategy, you're going to be sort of, again, trying to boil the ocean. So I would say before you start just mass producing content, really taking a step back to say, okay, what are the key areas? Again, you can go back to that mission critical keyword list, thinking about the areas that you really want to stand out in, where you're really trying to gain visibility. And then I would try to pick start with 3 to 5 areas. Don't pick 10 or 20, just pick a couple where you want to try to really start building up authority. Keep it pretty small and manageable. And then as you start to fill in some of those gaps and publish more content, again, you'll have data to go work from, and you'll be able to see what content is resonating and where you still have opportunity to grow.
I love it. That's like healthy. What you just described is like healthy content strategy. And it's because you're setting the appropriate expectations and boundaries, right? You're setting the bar for what to expect from the work product that you build. Just mirroring what you stated, from an e-commerce site, it's what abstract concepts or categories have you punched above your weight with this site on. So you may have this collection of shoes, right? But for some reason you have an arbitrary strength in house slippers. House slippers may not be the thing, in the entire company. People may not think that you're all about that, but for some reason it's doing well. Well, that would be a quick win if you really focus on expanding that. If you're already doing well with your poorly constructed category page about house slippers, right? But it just gives you the opportunity to start writing towards the buyer journey. I love that. The other one was, if you're that blog, the difference, and I think you accentuated this, it was you're not going to have as many huge, massive, quick win opportunities. So it's important for you to know and set the bar for those topics. One thing I will add, net new to that, is competitive cohort analysis, George, is going to be a very valuable thing to do what Yasmin communicated. It's that, this site wrote 100 articles in their first year. They didn't do it very, surgically, and they generated XYZ recurring traffic, right? So if you go write 100 articles and you do a little bit better job, you have a reasonable understanding of how much traffic that's going to produce. Well, sharpen that knife with your time. If you've got a brand new site, do that competitive analysis, not to see what they're doing really, just to set expectations for yourself. And I love the way that you described, setting expectations is part of this, because you want to know, I'm going to put in XYZ dollars and I'm going to get out, this much outcome. So how much do you do that with clients? How much is setting expectations with content a big part of it?
Oh, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I think especially with, senior leadership, a lot of time that may be more removed from the practice. It's really helping to educate my clients so that they can educate their teams on, what's reasonable. So kind of going back to how we started the conversation of, if someone's boss comes to them and says, I need to be #1 by next week for Black Friday, well, that's not going to be realistic. But then giving them some tools of, okay, here's some things we can do, because I feel like there's always something that you can do. It just may not be the thing that you want to do, but it's getting them more into that mindset of planning, because with SEO and content, it is always about planning ahead. So, like we've been reiterating over and over in this conversation, is just, starting to create the content when you have the idea, just, making sure that you're planning that foundation and preparing in advance versus in the final hour.
I love it. I know I love it. It's that CEO or the CMO that says, I want to rank #1 for X. It's like, okay, we need to have another chat first. By the way, fun fact, any SEOs, any SEO nerds in here, if you want to go see a very, very special search result around this time of year, go search for Black Friday. All right. It is, there's a lot of search results that are governed by their own rules, right? They are uniquely tuned. They are uniquely nice. If you want to hear, if there's some EMD, or PMDs, or exact match domainers, Black Friday this year, it's going to be real hard for someone to say that has nothing to do with EMDs, because BlackFriday.com, the Black Friday, are all in that mix, and that's a fun one to go check out. That's a really fun exploration. All right, so let's sorry for that little Jeff tangent. Black Friday being used. Yeah, good luck going and ranking #1 for Black Friday. Let's talk about. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to add one other thing, just kind of talking about Black Friday. Just because this is a question that I get a lot, so maybe it will be helpful to folks, is, if you are a retailer or someone where, holiday like Black Friday or Cyber Monday is pertinent to your business, I get the question oftentimes of, well, what do I do with that? Like, do I just create a new page every year? And I always encourage, no, let's keep the same page. You don't have to have it in your navigation all year, but don't delete it and start over because, like we've been talking about today, it takes time to build traction. So, yes, people aren't going to be searching for Black Friday all year round, but the page will have been live and that is going to be in your favor. So, certainly recommend, even if you don't have a page for this year, go ahead and start making one and be ready for next year. And you can start, having that prepared to go live and then keep that page live and just put it within your navigation once the time comes and then remove it when it's not. But don't completely delete the page and then have, a new URL, Black Friday 2021, 2022, and then a new one every year. So that would be my recommendation on that.
I'm so glad you said that. Okay, so now I'll put you on the spot. You and I are going to collaborate and we're going to write a couple of blog posts about that specific thing. Okay, because I have multiple presentations about that technique, those techniques, and it is still to this day the thing that everyone makes the mistake on. It's temporal versus temporal or event-based pages, and then they toss the event. It's like you spent 6 months building this event website. You have all the recordings from all the sessions, and then you just threw it in the garbage, and now your new event site is brand new, and you didn't do anything with the old stuff. I mean, that's the same thing as Black Friday. Your historical value is there. You can do it. There's some creative ways of making that produce high amounts of value all the time. Okay, so we're going to do that. That's going to be fun. There's the technique in there. It's called flashing. Flashing is not always a bad thing. And that's really what we'll get into. Maybe we could answer a few questions at the AMA on that. Okay, I've got a couple other questions coming in. I'm very sorry. My accent aigu may be a little bit off here, but I'm going to give it a shot. Marie Eve says, what kinds of questions and research should we do to spot quick wins in B2B services? Okay, so I'm going to say this is B2B service specific. I've got some great thoughts there, but I'd love your take on this. So we're talking about B2B service. I'm going to assume it's consulting services, technical implementation, or those types of services. Or B2B. You could also go down the track of industrial B2B. So pipe fitters. I don't know. I'm just, I mean, what would you think about that?
So I really approach it very similarly. So with all of the industries, it's a very similar approach. It's just interweaving who your target audience is. And in the case of B2B, you're thinking about who are you targeting, who are you serving with that product? And so it's beyond looking at competitive research. You want to make sure that the content that you have is positioned for them. And so what I found with a lot of my B2B clients is that the keywords that they're trying to rank for or target will generate a lot of educational content or that definition-based type content that we were talking about. And oftentimes, who you're marketing towards, that's not really your audience, right? They don't need that sort of fundamental, like they're not doing that educational research, but that doesn't mean that that's not valuable. I think you can still look at that type of content. If it's for example, guide type content that's ranking well for, definitions, you don't necessarily need to make it that educational piece, but how can you, rework it so that it does cater to the audience that you're targeting and maybe just, incorporate some of those questions, but very briefly. I don't think that needs to be the core focus where you're, again, just focusing more on, what does this person care about? What does my audience care about? And making sure that you're focusing more on that. But I think in terms of the research and the approach, it's the same. You just need to be a little bit more creative, again, because a lot of it I have found is that sort of redundant educational content, which isn't necessarily, someone that's, maybe in a high level IT position isn't necessarily that they already know what it is. That's not what they're looking for. So how do you sort of position that a little bit more uniquely to match what your business model is?
I love that. Yeah, it's you may need to in B2B services, you may need some generalist content that illustrates that you have that expertise, but you'll win with the specialized. You'll win with the niched down version. You'll win with the additional expertise version. You'll win with the what makes you special on top of it. So use your, you're doing pipe fitting. You're doing pipe fitting services. Well, you're talking about everything there is to know about pipe fitting, right? But then
Hmm.
your guides for breweries, your guides for, for HVAC, those are the ones that illustrate that you truly have that unique expertise against those target markets. Maybe so. The other thing would be think about the buying team and then the decision maker as separate
Exactly.
audiences. The buying team is your generalist. The decision maker, uh, the CMO of Reebok doesn't only think about shoes when they're thinking about how to
Yeah.
market, right? So you're not just writing the thing about shoes, you're writing some more generalist e-commerce content too. I love those examples,
Yeah.
and niching down can really be a way to win. So
And I
looks like
think
you had
one
some
other thing
thoughts
I
on
would
that.
add to that is to think about how you're positioning the content on the site as well. So think about what would be helpful again for the person that you're targeting. So for example, if your navigation just has a list of your products and you have these very heavily branded product names that, okay, great, I don't know what that is.
Right.
As someone that's coming to the site, maybe you take a look at your navigation or how you're positioning your content and your product and have, for example, a solutions menu. Here, this is a situation in which this product would be helpful. So think about how that person is trying to find your product. What, again, back to the pain points, what
Hmm.
problem are you trying to solve for them? And then try to set it up in that way versus just sort of an arbitrary, here's my list of products. Well, okay, great, but I don't really want to click through all those to figure out what I need. Maybe have it organized by industry or, again, use case or something like that that would make it easier for them to shop.
I love that idea. The one thing I'll also add there, at Content Marketing World this year, I was the lucky enough to be the MC for for a couple of days on one of the stages. One of them was on agency strategies and service company strategies. The number one tip for how to make those things work is to niche down and specialize. The other one was focus on the pain points and the scenarios that you solve. So, from a how about the question was B2B service? What types of questions and research should we do? The questions and research you should do is internally, everyone on your
Hmm.
team that's an expert, and then going out to your existing clients. Those questions go for them. You might not have to even look externally to get enough ammunition to really tell the story about why your service company is unique. And what that doesn't mean, if you're a cloud service provider, you have a page about cloud service providers,
Hmm.
about cloud services. Well, guess what? That's not differentiated. And a lot of
Exactly.
service companies, the cobbler's kids have no shoes with their sites.
Hmm.
And it's what services do you do? It's not about what services you do. It's about what makes you special. And what makes you
Exactly.
special is nobody's going to have a manual for that. It's only in your brains and your people's brains. I know you've worked a lot in hospitality
Hmm.
and other types of those spaces. You've said, it's very similar. However, you're often in the situation where experiential and aggregator um, and affiliate cause a very, very different construct in hospitality. How do you think about things differently for differentiation in that situation?
Yeah, so with that, I think the focus is, I've worked for a couple of hotel companies, and I think the focus is often there, of course, on the product, so the room pages or, the amenities page and things like that. But again, it's especially with something like hospitality or travel, you're trying to tell a story or paint a picture for someone, especially if it's a place that they've never been, right? So why should they stay at your property or why should they come to this place? Versus somewhere else. And so taking a step back and thinking about what content would help to supplement that. So one of my former companies, we created these destination guides where we were still able to showcase the hotels, but it would have things, again, going back to sort of the pain points or what questions people have specific to those markets. So if it's, you know, the top 10 covered bridges in Vermont or, whatever things are popular this time of year, or travel tips for families or, and again, you want to try to be creative and unique with those, because some of those can be, a little bit overly saturated as well online. So again, thinking about what unique position that you're bringing to that. But, it's not like this content just lived in a silo on the site. They would have, this content, and then there would be a call to action to, here's all the properties that we have available in this destination. Once we felt like, okay, they've read this. Okay, great. I feel, pretty good about this decision. Now I can book. So again, it's just sort of filling in those gaps for customers and helping them to visualize the end result.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. Making sure that if you're going to write something that could be generic, you're trying to figure out what your unique angle is, and just don't make it super forced. I've seen some people,
Right.
they're trying to tie A to B, A to C, when A has nothing to do with C. So
Right.
you you're writing about beaches over here. You're writing about uh, CD players over here. The
Yeah.
best CD players for the beach.
Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
really. That's actually not bridge content, because those two concepts don't typically have anything to do with one another. You've still got to write that middle. If you think you're going to be the
Yep.
expert of beaches, and you think you're going to be the expert of reviewing um, CD players, those two things aren't together. You can't just smush them together in one page, which has somebody walking on the beach with a CD player, which would kind of be funny, because who walks on the beach with a CD player anymore?
Yes,
Like, come on,
exactly.
you're rocking a big old CD player. Cool.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think with
yeah.
I was going to say, I think with hospitality or with any industry, really, we sort of talked about it earlier, but you want to make sure that you're present at all stages of the customer journey. So if someone is
Yes,
planning a
absolutely.
trip to XYZ destination, if they're just starting, maybe they just want to know what there is to do there. So that would be like pretty high top of funnel content. But maybe if they've sort of narrowed it down, maybe it's getting into more specific travel tips or things to pack or things to bring. So just, making sure that you have coverage across top, middle, and bottom funnel content.
Yeah, post purchase too, in
Exactly. Yep.
travel is so important for brand affinity, repeat business, and adherence to your brand.
Absolutely.
The one question I ask folks is: are there communities, forums, paid, behind walls,
Mhm.
ahead of walls, or other, discussing your destination, discussing your brand,
Mhm.
discussing similar brands? um, that conversation's happening. If it's not happening on your site, that's your fault. And
Mhm.
so when you're looking at a big hotel chain and they're dedicating 2 pages to each of their hotels, and there's you know a, a FAQ section about the hotel that doesn't provide much insight. And it tells you that yes, they accept pets here, and they
Mhm.
have to be under 50 pounds. Great, right? That's all they're giving you. They're not providing anything that connects to the buyer
Exactly.
journey. And that's really where they're hoping that enough people still want to buy their product via them direct, and that the differentiation of them being direct is enough to continue to drive growth. And then you've got that
Mhm.
next tier of hospitality that are doing a good job, but they aren't differentiated. So really thinking critically about ways to differentiate. I love the way that you've described that, regardless of what the product is, but especially if it's in hospitality, where
Mhm.
your unique value is your competitive advantage. All right. So right now, you mentioned earlier, we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but I want to talk about what's happening right now. Content calendars. Can you walk through how you shore up content calendars in Q4
Yeah.
for companies? What's your process? What do you think about?
Yeah.
What's it look like? And how can people who haven't really gotten into that best practice in Q4
Mhm.
kind of tune their fork for that?
Yeah, so I think, again, a great starting point is to go back, take a look at what your overall business goals are for the upcoming quarter, for the upcoming year, because anything that you're doing with content, ideally, you want to align to those overarching business goals, right? So always start there. And I think the next piece, what I always like to look at is, what does your marketing calendar look like? Are there product launches or other emphases that you're going to have throughout the year? And how can you start planning out content that's going to support those things? I think it's just great to have that sort of synergy and, again, cross-channel collaboration. So using those as a starting point. And then taking a look at, if you've been sort of working through content or you have existing content, again, taking a look at what's performing well, what's not performing well, where are there gaps still that you need to fill in? We were talking a little bit about competitive analysis, sort of I think a lot of times people get into the sort of set it and forget it mentality with content, but revisiting that to see, okay, great, how is this performing? Are there still things that I'm missing here? Why are these other 5 sites still outranking me? Oh, it's because they're talking about this. I need to create a page about this, or I need to create this. So, really taking a look at that and assessing where those opportunities lie. And then, like I said, I always like to map it out at least a couple of months in advance, and plan for. A lot of people say, I don't have a lot of time, or, if you're the sort of sole person writing all the content, if you can just do one topic a month, hey, that's better than nothing a month. So I always try to get, at least a couple, but do what you can, because something is always better than nothing. And again, you can focus on those quick wins, but in terms of new content production, I always aim to do at least a couple pages per month at a minimum, depending on, of course, if you have a lot of resources, you can crank out a lot more content than that. But planning that out for a few months ahead of time, at least, so that you've got a plan and a strategy for the upcoming months. But again, just really making sure that you're lining up to your overarching business goals and what the need is there.
Beautiful. I think that's a great way to wrap the show. I had mentioned that end of year is always a good time to do a process audit. Where is your manual labor happening? Where's your inefficiencies? Understand how much content did you create? How much of it was successful? How many times did you update stuff and how much it was successful? Teams like yours make that a shocking kind of mirror tuning requirement, because we weren't very efficient last year. We produced 100 articles and only 10 of them worked. Did we even know what worked means? Did we, so there's all of those things this is a good time to do that at the end of the year, and really think about how much content we got out of the door, how much we updated, how much of it were we proud of. We're proud of the outcomes. All right. So where can people find you? And by the way, bit.ly, if you can see the screen, bit.ly/CSCAMA. That's the Slack channel. Any questions we didn't get to? Yusuf, a number of other ones in there that are in the list. Please, I'll shoot them over when I jump in, but go check that out. We'll answer them. Where can people find you? How can people get in touch with you other than in the AMA in about 2 minutes?
Yeah, so in addition to the AMA, you can find me on LinkedIn, or feel free to email me. It's yasmin@2octobers.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up. So
wonderful. Well, this has been such a cool conversation. Yes. You truly illustrate that you know how to do this. And I love when you're describing those research processes. It's very pragmatic and very effective. So I appreciate that. What I also appreciate is a good deal. You like that segue? Okay, webinar VIP is the promo code for MarketMuse Standard. In the next few months, there are so many updates, including a keyword research solution that will knock your socks off. Get in now. That's the only thing I can tell you. There's this webinar VIP. There's maybe other promo codes you might be able to search around for, but this is the time to be here. I am so excited about some of the upcoming things that are coming. I'm also looking forward to this AMA. So we're going to drop off of here. Again, replay's coming in a couple days. Go check out the webinar archives. You can just type in a word and then MarketMuse webinar archives, and you'll probably find a webinar about the thing you're worried about. But again, Yasmin, thank you for joining us. We love 2 Octobers and everyone there, and especially you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. This is great.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Thank you. See everyone in the AMA.
AMA.